All right. Before we left school, we had been talking about the French and Indian War, and we actually already did this particular reading together in class. This was where we were looking, it was the year of 1756, and Britain had sent George Washington to talk to the French about that land west of the Appalachian Mountains, which is called the Ohio Territory. And the French were saying, nope, that actually belongs to us. And Britain was saying, well, technically, that's going to be ours. And so kind of went back and forth where eventually declared war. And that year was 1756. And we talked a little bit about on this page here, if you remember, some of the advantages and disadvantages that French and Britain had in this. And one of the things we said was that France, if you remember, it seemed as if France was going to win. They had all of those allies with a lot of the Native Americans there, and it seemed like they were going to, do pretty well. Then we talked a little bit about how Britain, though, their troops were like twice the size. They had all of the food being produced right there by colonists, and it seemed as if they would do well. War goes back and forth where finally the British do win, and they claim the land for themselves. We looked at this map down here and actually colored this where we talked about how before the war, there was this big chunk of land here is what they were really fighting over. And after the war, France was completely eliminated from this map, and we were left with really being basically Spain, most of this land here, and then Britain owning all of this land here. A couple other things that we had talked about, if I just scroll up here. Here's one little thing about the French and Indian War, also known as the 7-Year War. It says George Washington came to Pennsylvania with a message to get France out of England's territory. France refused and fought Britain for land west of Appalachian Mountains. Indians were allies with France and helped them fight. France had the upper hand at first, but Britain rallied and won the war. French colonization in the New World ended, and it is also known as the 7-Year War. We talked a little bit about Benjamin Franklin's political cartoon here of that snake of join or die. And he created that to sort of really urge the colonists that it was important to unite during this war. If we didn't unite, we were not going to be successful. One of the things that we had talked about was how after this war was finished, some things start happening in the colonies, which is really going to upset a lot of the colonists because Britain realized that war was kind of expensive and we need to figure out how are we going to get that money back. And they realized, well, we did fight for the colonists, so the colonists should really, they should really step up and help pay for this. So over the next week, we're going to really be looking at some of these main causes and doing some activities that kind of go with that. So to start with, I'm just going to scroll down here. We are going to look at what was called the Proclamation of 1763. So if you look carefully at this map, let me see if I can zoom in for you. All right, if we look at this map, we can see the colonies all along the eastern seaboard here, right? And these colonies were established, people were living there. We had our New England colonies, our middle colonies, and our southern colonies. Now, remember, after the French and Indian War, Britain said, you know what, we're going to save that land that we fought over, and we're going to reserve that for the Native Americans. And they're going to basically kind of use the Appalachian Mountains as sort of a border. You can see this Appalachian Mountain range right through here. Just a little bit further west of that is where that Proclamation line of 1763 lies. And basically what that said is King George III issued a proclamation that banned colonists to settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. So let's look at that word proclamation. He's proclaiming, he's saying this is what's going to happen. And when you ban someone from doing something, you're saying you cannot do it. So King George is basically saying to the colonists, you may not settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. He hoped to please the Native Americans who had sided against him during the French and Indian War. He also wanted to avoid sending troops to defend the colonists on the native land. People were angry and moved anyway. So this land here that he is saying, the colonists are not allowed to settle in, that's going to anger a lot of the colonists, and they're going to ignore the king's proclamation and go ahead and move west as it is. All right, so that's our proclamation of 1763. I will post this link here so you can look at it as well back on Google Classroom. You're also going to notice that on Google Classroom you have an Ed puzzle that's just going to kind of go over this Proclamation of 1763 a little bit more for you. All right.